Hello everyone, I am Dr. Iram Jahan Nazir Khan from Sadhguru Gadge Maharaj College, Karad, Maharashtra, India. We will be seeing about the respiratory tract organs in the topic physiology of respiration. So we will start with the basics. So what is respiration? Respiration is nothing but a process of taking oxygen inside the body and giving carbon dioxide out of the body. And the another definition states that it is biochemical mechanism in which chemical energy is liberated in the stepwise manner on oxidation of organic compounds present in the food. There is another definition which states that respiration is the sum total of the physical and chemical processes in an organism by which oxygen is conveyed to tissues and cells, and the oxidation products carbon dioxide and water are given off. So what we understand from this is that respiration is a process which keeps us alive, but also it helps in the oxidation of food. So it is related with the digestive system. As it is related with the digestive system because it helps in the oxidation of the organic compounds which we take in the food. So it also helps in the liberation of energy. So respiration plays a very important role assisting the other functions and the other processes of the body. So what is respiratory system consist of? Respiratory system consists of respiratory zone and conducting zones. So what comes in respiratory zones? Respiratory zone is a site of gas exchange. Respiratory zone consists of bronchioles, alveolar ducts and alveoli. And what comes in conducting zone? Conducting zones shows respiratory structures which are nose, nasal cavity, pharynx and trachea. So the difference here is that the conducting zone helps in the passing of the gases in the filtered form to the respiratory zone where the actual respiration or the give and take of the gases take place, that is the alveoli part. So there are respiratory zone and conducting zones. And also one thing you should understand that in the respiration process, the respiratory muscles also play a very important role which assist in inspiration and expiration process. So which are the respiratory muscles? Diaphragm and other muscles which helps to promote ventilation. So the other muscles are the intercostal muscles which are present between the ribs. So diaphragm, intercostal muscles, and also the diaphragm shows the phrenic or radial muscles. So these muscles assist in the respiration process. So now you know that the respiratory system consists of two parts: respiratory zone, conducting zone. Respiratory zone is the actual site of gas exchange, and conducting zone, as the name suggests, is the conducting structures. So before moving on, we will know what are the basic functions of the respiratory system. So first, it provides oxygen to the bloodstream and removes carbon dioxide. Next, oxidation of food and energy formation. I have already explained it before. Next, it enables sound production or vocalization. So there is a part called larynx which helps in the sound production or the vocalization. Next is it enables protective and reflexive non-breathing air movements such as coughing and sneezing. Okay, so why this coughing and sneezing takes place? To keep the air passage clear. Next is control of acid and base balance of the blood. And the last is control of blood pH. So this the acid and base balance or blood pH, it indicates that the normal pH of blood is maintained and the respiratory system or the respiratory process plays a very important role in maintaining the normal pH. So if the body is devoid of oxygen, the pH increases because more and more carbon dioxide is present in the air as in the body, as compared to the oxygen. So body consists of more carbon dioxide, and the more destruction of carbon dioxide takes place in the body, and the blood contains more pH of the blood will increase. Next is respiratory system. So this is the diagram which shows the respiratory tract organs. So respiratory tract organ starts from the visible part, which is the nose. So nose, it shows the nasal cavity. This is the nostril. From the nose, the next part will be the pharynx. The pharynx, then the larynx, which is present here. Larynx will leads to the trachea. Trachea will lead to the bronchus, a primary bronchus, which will enter into the respective right and left lungs, and this bronchus will further divide into a bronchial tree, which we will see for in the next points. So this you should all remember that the respiratory system consists of the parts nose, then the pharynx, larynx. Pharynx is also part of digestive system. It is a common opening for air and food. So then larynx, then trachea leads to the bronchus. The bronchus divides into the primary branches, which enters into the respective lungs. So there is a lungs, right lung and left lung. Right lung shows 3 lobes, 1, 2 and 3, and left lung shows 2 lobes. And there is a respiratory muscle which is called as diaphragm, which is present below the thoracic cavity. It is dome shaped, and another muscle is present between the ribs, which is not shown in this figure. So moving on, next we will see all the parts one by one. So we will start with the nose. So what is nose? The nose is the only externally visible part of the respiratory system. So the external part are called as external nares. It is also called as nostril. So you all know, are very well familiar with these parts. It is a nostril. So a pair of nostrils are present in the nose. So next is nasal cavity. So you should know that there is a nasal septum. This is a bone. It is a nasal septum which divides this nose into the 2 chambers. So there are 2 nasal chambers. Okay, so nasal cavity is made up of 2 nasal chambers. This cavity is created by this nasal septum. So externally, this part of the nose is called as columella. This is infratip, and this is supratip. These things you should know. And the nose is divided into 2 nasal cavity by a nasal septum. Okay, moving on, next, the nasal cavity is made up of 2 nasal chamber, as you all know. Now the nasal chamber, each nasal chamber is divided into further 3 chambers. These chambers are vestibular, respiratory and olfactory. So these are the things you should be well aware about the nose. Next, the next part is conch. So the nose also shows some bony ridges and cavities made by the cranium. So what is conch? Conch is the modified bony ridges of nasal chambers. And why it is important? It is important to increase the surface area of the chamber. So it helps in increasing the surface area of the chamber. So there are 3 conchae, that are superior, middle and inferior nasal conchae. So in the figure you can see this is superior here, this is middle, and there is inferior conchae. So there are 3 nasal conchae in each nostril. So this assists in increasing the surface area of the chamber of the nose. Next, I told you there are also cavities, nasal cavities. So they are called as paranasal sinuses. So these were the bony ridges of the cranium, and these are the cavities. Paranasal cavities or paranasal sinuses, which are the cavities formed by cranium. These are frontal, sphenoidal, maxillary and ethmoidal. So you are very well familiar with the word sinus. I have sinus problem. I am suffering from sinusitis. So this is nothing but these cavities are getting infected and we get irritation or inflammation, and this is sinusitis. So which are these cavities? They are frontal, ethmoid and maxillary and ethmoidal. So you should all know the names very well. Next, you should also know that the respiratory mucosa, the nose shows respiratory mucosa. So there is a Bowman's gland present in the nose which secretes the mucosal parts. This mucosa lines the balance of the nasal cavity. So it is present, it is lining the nasal cavity, or we can say the nasal chamber. So this gland secretes mucus which contains lysozyme. This lysozyme helps to destroy the foreign bacterial particle which is harmful to the body. So it is destroyed. Next, the nasal part, the nose also shows nasal hairs. So nasal hairs, it helps in the filtration of air. It does not allow the heavy particles to enter into the along with the air into the respiratory tract. So these heavy particles are trapped in the nasal hairs. So there is a particulate matter. It is said that particulate matter above the size of 5 microns are trapped in the nasal hairs, or we can see in the upper respiratory tract, which is the conducting zone. So another part you should very well aware of, that is nasopharynx. What is nasopharynx? It is a combination of nasal chamber and the pharynx part. So this part is posterior part of pharynx, and it helps to pass the filtered air to the larynx. So now you know there is a part called nasopharynx which helps in passage of filtered air from the nose to the larynx. Now we will summarize the functions of nose, which is providing an airway for respiration, moistening and warming the entering air so that the air is filtered and devoid of all the impurities. And next is filtering inspired air and cleaning it of foreign matter and housing the olfactory receptors. Okay. We will move on to the next part, which is pharynx. What is pharynx? So pharynx is a funnel shaped tube of skeletal muscle that connects to the nasal cavity and mouth superiorly. So this is the pharynx. It is connected to the nasal cavity and the mouth portion at the superior part, and larynx and esophagus at the posterior part. So this is the pharynx part. You should know that the pharynx is a common opening for the food. It is connected to the mouth cavity as well as the nasal cavity, and further at the posterior part it is connected to the esophagus and larynx. From here it diverges, and the divergence of respiration and the digestive part takes place. Okay, moving on. So we will see one part. We will see first nasopharynx. What is nasopharynx? It lies posterior to the nasal cavity. Okay. Now posterior to the nasal cavity. So this is nasal cavity. This is, you can see well the three different zones, naso, oro and hypopharynx. So this blue color is a nasopharynx, and nasopharynx is posterior to the nasal cavity. It is strictly an air passageway, and it is lined with pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. So you should know that it is strictly a air passageway. Next, it closes during swallowing to prevent food from entering the nasal cavity. So this nasopharynx is a strictly air passage, and it closes during the swallowing of food because to avoid the food particles. Now next, oropharynx and laryngopharynx. Laryngopharynx is the another word for hypopharynx. So what is oropharynx? Here it is oropharynx. It is the extend inferiorly from the level of soft palate to the epiglottis. It is a common passageway for food and air. You can see here. It is a common passageway for the food as well as for the air, which is oropharynx. And also it shows lining of stratified here, stratified squamous epithelium. And plus there are two tonsils which are present in this zone, that are palatine tonsils and lingual tonsils. So oropharynx is not a strictly air passageway. It is a common passageway for food and air. So this is the second zone of pharynx. Now the third, that is hypopharynx. The other word is laryngopharynx. Why laryngopharynx? Because it connects further to the larynx. So it is also a common passageway for food and air, and it extends to the larynx. So in the respiratory part, this passage extends to the larynx, and in the digestive part it further continues as an esophagus. So here the divergence of the respiratory system and the digestive system takes place at the laryngopharynx level. So it lies posterior to the upright epiglottis. So here epiglottis is present. So now you all know that the pharynx shows three regions: nasopharynx, oropharynx and hypopharynx. And this is a strictly air passage, and this both are a food and air passage. And here the divergence of both the digestive and respiratory system takes place. So moving on to the larynx. So what is larynx? Larynx is also called as voice box because it is responsible for production of the voice, or whatever we hear or whatever you are hearing now, because my larynx is working now. So now larynx is attaches to the hyoid bone, which you can see here, and opens into the laryngopharynx. I told in the previous photograph that laryngopharynx, which is hypopharynx, this will leads to the larynx. This time. Okay, now it attaches to the hyoid bone and opens into the laryngopharynx. So it continues with the trachea posteriorly. So larynx, here this is the photo of larynx, and at the posterior end this larynx continues as a trachea. So the larynx is made up of 9 segments of cartilage. So this 9 segment of cartilage shows unpaired and paired systems. That is, unpaired cartilages are thyroid, epiglottic and cricoid. You can see the cricoid cartilage here, thyroid cartilage here, and epiglottic cartilage here. So these are unpaired, that means they are present singly. So the single cartilage of thyroid, epiglottic and cricoid is present at the larynx region, and the paired cartilages are arytenoids, corniculate and cuneiforms. So you can see here corniculate, arytenoid and cuneiform. So these are the paired cartilages. So in total you should know that there are 9 segments of cartilages present in the larynx. So this, what is thyroid cartilage, is also, the other name is Adam apple. Your thyroid cartilage is unpaired. Cricoid cartilage, so cricoid cartilage is also unpaired. It attaches the larynx to trachea. So where is cricoid cartilage? Yes, here. So it is single and it attaches the larynx to the tracheal region. So arytenoid cartilage attaches to the vocal folds. This is the arytenoid cartilage. So there are vocal folds present here, which is responsible for the production of sound. Next, this is the structure of the larynx. So false cords and true cords are present in the larynx. What are false cords? So these are vocal cords. You can see true vocal cords, and these are false vocal cords, that are vestibular folds. So you can see from the figure, What are they? And false chords hold breath against thoracic air pressure. So they don't produce sound, they just assist in helping the holding the breath or air to maintain the pressure, to create the pressure, maintain the pressure. So next is vocal cord, which is a true cord. What they do? They vibrate to produce sound of different frequencies. So these are the true vocal cords, and by holding the breath, creating the air pressure, and the vibrations, the production of sound takes place, and depending upon the vibrations and the air pressure, the different frequencies of sound is produced. What are the other parts doing here? The other parts like pharynx, mouth, sinus, nose, tongue, lips, it helps in altering the sound. As I am talking to you, every single word is heard differently. So this is the alterations in the sound which is caused by the moving of all the parts. In my lip, while talking, our lips, our nose also, the breathing system also is different, and this all assist in the production of different words or different sounds. So moving on next, the other part of the respiratory tract is glottis and epiglottis. So what is glottis? Glottis is nothing but pharynx opens into larynx by a slit-like opening. That is glottis. So glottis is nothing but a opening by which a pharynx opens into the larynx and the respiratory system continues further. So here you can see in the figure the glottis is shown. So it is a slit-like opening where the respiratory system continues as into the larynx. So it is above the larynx. You should know this. It is above the larynx. Next, what is epiglottis? Epiglottis is leaf-like flap of cartilage present at glottis, which closes the opening during swallowing. So where is epiglottis? Epiglottis is shown here. So this is a flap-like cartilage over the glottis region. It closes the glottis region when the food is taken in or the swallowing process is taking place, because this opening leads to respiratory system and the food particles should not enter into the respiratory system. So the epiglottis helps in the covering of the glottis. So these are two parts, glottis and epiglottis. Next part is trachea. So what is a trachea? You can see here very well a diagram of trachea. So trachea is a tubular passageway for air connecting larynx to lungs. So this from larynx, the larynx posteriorly shows the trachea, and this trachea further branches out and enters into the lungs. So it is a tubular passageway. It is a conducting zone, passageway of air. It is anterior to esophagus. Okay, anterior means it is at the front side of the esophagus. So C-shaped incomplete rings of hyaline cartilage prevent collapsing of trachea during inspiration. So what is C-shaped incomplete rings of hyaline cartilage? These are those rings. So these are the tracheal cartilage rings which hold the trachea or tracheal muscle and keep it open and prevent its collapsing. So it is incompletely C-shaped. So the remaining, the open part of the C-shape, which is at the back side, it holds the, or it is the part where the esophagus is attached. Next, pseudostratified epithelium with cilia and goblet cell are present in the tracheal region. So there is a great mechanism for the filtration of air throughout the respiratory tract, because the ultimate air which goes to the respiratory zone should be of a very pure form. So this all the air tracts are provided with mucus, cilia and several types of cells and glands which assist maximally to purify the air. So here the cilia are present and the goblet cells are present which produces mucus, and the foreign particles or bacteria attaches to the mucus and the lysosome digest it. And for the cilia, the beating mechanism of the cilia, if anything gets trapped or it traps the foreign particles, the beating mechanism of the cilia helps in throwing these particles again to the buccal cavity, and from the buccal cavity to the mouth, and from where we by the coughing or spitting we spit it out. So this is the mechanism. Next, posteriorly, the trachea divides into two primary bronchi which enter into right and left lung respectively. So you all know now there are tracheal cartilages which are C-shaped, and this helps in preventing the collapsing of the trachea, and posteriorly this trachea branches out into the bronchi, to two primary bronchi. This is one and this is two, and this each bronchi enter into the respective lungs, which we will see in the next slide. So this is the bronchi. So here you should know that the trachea divides into the primary bronchus, and this primary bronchus enters into the respective lungs, and in the respective lungs again it shows branching, and all the branches gets innervates to the respective lobes. So here air reaching the bronchi is warmed and cleansed of impurities, and it is also saturated with water vapor. So, and air passages undergo 23 orders of branching in the lungs. So this is the main part which you should know. Now you know that the tracheal rings further bifurcates as a primary bronchus, and which enters into the respiratory zone. Now this primary bronchus again divided into the secondary bronchus, and each secondary bronchus enters into the respective lobes of the lungs, and this secondary bronchus again divides into tertiary bronchus, and then into bronchioles, and bronchioles into the terminal bronchus, then respiratory bronchus, and ultimately into the alveoli. So here is a figure which will help you to know the things. So this was a trachea, and we have taken only the one side of the branching to make you understand easily. So these are the cartilaginous rings which is attached to these muscles to prevent their collapsing, so that air is passed properly. So this is the primary bronchus. Here it will enter into the lung. While by entering to the lung, it will bifurcate again. Okay, so it is a secondary bronchus. So this primary bronchus has divided into the secondary bronchus. This is secondary bronchus, this is secondary bronchus, and this secondary bronchus again divides. So these are the tertiary bronchi. So this tertiary bronchi again divides into smaller bronchi. Each tertiary bronchi divides into the smaller bronchi, and these smaller bronchi ultimately forms a bronchiole. These bronchioles again leads to the terminal bronchiole. Terminal bronchiole again leads to the respiratory bronchiole. This is the final part. The respiratory bronchiole leads to the alveoli, which is a grapes-like punch, and where the actual mechanism of gaseous exchange takes place. So you can see the order of branching, and it is said that there are 23 order of branching in the lungs. So moving on, these are the bronchioles, which is the last part here. This is the last part which is explained in this slide. Okay, so respiratory bronchiole leads to alveolar duct. Okay, where is the respiratory bronchiole? This is the respiratory bronchiole. This was a terminal bronchiole, and terminal bronchiole means last bronchiole, and this last bronchiole will lead into the respiratory bronchiole again. This respiratory bronchiole will lead to the alveolar ducts. See here, the ducts are present. Then to the terminal cluster of alveolar sac. These are all the sacs composed of alveoli. Alveoli are grapes-like structure. So, what are alveoli? They are thin-walled lobulated structure and surrounded by capillary network. Okay, so these are the alveoli. These are the alveoli, and it is also, so here it is shown the alveoli, single alveoli. It is surrounded by a network of capillary. Okay, capillary network of surface of pulmonary alveoli and pulmonary veins, because this capillary will carry the respective pure and impure blood to the lungs and to the heart. So for the lungs, for purification, so there are pulmonary veins and pulmonary artery. Okay, so next, approximately 300 million alveoli are present, and the surface area shows 100 meter square. So you can imagine how the respiratory system is well made, so to attain the maximum gaseous exchange. So this is the last part of the respiratory system, that is alveolus, and here the main gaseous exchange take place. It is enveloped by the capillary network, so that the gaseous exchange between the capillaries and the alveoli takes place, and the exchange of gases of O2 and CO2 takes place. How it takes, I will explain in the next video, but for now you should know all the parts and what are their functions and how they assist into the respiration. So this is the alveoli part. Next we will see the alveoli. So it is the accounts for most of the lungs volume. So the most of the lungs volume comprises of alveoli. It provides tremendous surface area for gas exchange. I have explained it earlier only, that the area of the gas exchange is maximized by the alveoli. Further, lecithin is a surfactant of alveoli. So there is a surfactant present in the alveoli which is called as lecithin. Okay, because it is not supported by cartilage to avoid the collapse. So what is the mechanism here which prevents the collapsing? So here a lecithin surfactant is present which reduces the surface tension between the between two alveoli. So the surface tension between the alveoli is reduced and it keeps the alveoli open. Next, you should know, this is important, that lecithin is a surfactant present and no cartilage is present supporting for the opening. So lecithin surfactant helps to prevent the collapsing. Next, also there is a pores of cone. So what are they? They are small communications between adjacent pulmonary alveoli and provide a collateral pathway for aeration. So we see this grapes-like structure alveoli, but between them also there is a communication, so, and there is a sort of give and take of air. So this is helped by pores of cone. So there is a figure here. These are the pores of. So this is an alveoli, and this is an alveoli, and this is a pores of cone. So it helps between. It is a pathway for aeration and communication between the two alveoli. So now you all know that the alveolus is a main part where all the gaseous exchange take place, and the pores of cone helps in the communication between two alveoli or for the aeration purpose. Next is the lungs. So the lungs is located in thoracic cavity. So this all structure starting from the primary bronchus to the alveolus is all situated inside the lungs. So that is the main part. So lungs, it is situated in the thoracic cavity. The nature of the muscle is spongy and elastic. Lungs are very spongy and elastic. So it shows expansion and relaxation. Next, the lungs are enclosed by a membrane which is also called as pleural membrane. This is the pleura. This is the pleural membrane which encloses the lungs and it protects the lung. So the outer pleural membrane is called as parietal pleura and the inner membrane is called as visceral pleura. So there are two membranes, and between these two membranes there is a fluid present. So pleural cavity is formed by these two membranes of pleural membrane. So in this pleural membrane there is a pleural fluid. It is a cavity is a thin space, and the pleural fluid is a clear fluid which helps in the protection of the lungs, and it helps to protect it from any mechanical injuries. This fluid minimizes friction between the tissues and provide surface tension in the pleural cavity. Lungs also secrete a chemical substance called surfactant which facilitate the surface tension. So you should know that the lungs are covered by the pleural membrane, and the parietal and visceral pleural membranes are showing a cavity which is called as pleural cavity, and it is filled with the fluid which is clear and helps in reducing the friction, and it assists the lungs. So next, the left lung and the right lung. So right lung is a little larger than the left lung, and right lung shows 3 lobes, 1, 2 and 3, while the left lung shows 2 lobes. So we will see this in next slide. Left lung is separated into upper and lower lobes by a fissure which is oblique fissure, and right lung is separated into 3 lobes, that is superior, middle and inferior, by oblique and horizontal fissure. So this is the right lung, these are the horizontal fissure. This is the right middle lobe, right inferior lobe, this is oblique fissure, and this is the right superior lobe. So left lung is divided into 2 lobes, and it is separated by the oblique fissure. Here you can see the pleura, and below the thoracic cavity is the diaphragm. Next, the right lung is larger than left lung, and inflammation of the parietal pleura is called as pleurisy. So anything which causes inflammation in the pleural region, it is the term is given by pleurisy. So now we saw all the respiratory muscles or respiratory organs which assist in the respiration process. Now the last part is respiratory muscles. So we saw the conducting zone, we saw the respiratory zone, and now the respiratory muscle. So first respiratory muscle is diaphragm. As I have showed you in the previous, here the diaphragm is present. So diaphragm is dome shaped sheet of muscle and tendon which is present at the base of lungs. It separates the abdominal and thoracic cavity, and this diaphragm is made up of phrenic and radial muscles. It is the main muscle of respiration because the contraction and relaxation of the diaphragm helps in increasing and decreasing the thoracic cavity, and ultimately decreases and increases the pressure of the air, thoracic pressure of the air, which assists in the inspiration and expiration processes. Now next is intercostal muscles. So what are they? Intercostal muscles are muscle group that are situated in between the ribs that create and move the chest wall. So you should know that the muscles which are present in the ribs, between the ribs, are called as intercostal muscle, and they help to move the chest wall. So while we take in or give out oxygen, so these muscles assist to expand the chest wall by contractions and relaxation process. So this is further divided into 3 types. Intercostal muscle shows external intercostal muscle, internal intercostal muscle, and innermost intercostal. So the external intercostal muscles are responsible for forced and quiet inhalation. The internal intercostal muscle are responsible for forced exhalation, and the innermost intercostal muscle separate from the internal intercostal muscle by a group of nerves and blood vessels. So here it is a figure of interest. So this is the rib, and the muscles present between the ribs are called as intercostal muscle. They are of three types: internal intercostal muscle, which helps in the inhalation process, and external intercostal muscle here, and the innermost intercostal muscle. So you should know that three types of intercostal muscles are present, which are present in between the ribs, and there is a diaphragm which shows the radial and phrenic muscles. So now you are very well aware of the respiratory tract, conducting zone organs, and respiratory zone organs, and final, that is the respiratory muscles. I hope you understood the topic very well. We will meet again in the next video. Thank you.